All right, welcome to the first of its kind, world-changing manufacturers network. Lisa Ryan has her ears to the ground and her heart in the game. Get ongoing education and new connections right here with Lisa and the Manufacturers Network. Buckle your seat, listen, and spread the word. Here's Lisa.
Hey, it's Lisa Ryan. Welcome to the Manufacturers Network podcast. I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Kerrie Jordan. Kerrie is the Group Vice President of Product Management at Epicor and host of the Manufacturing the Future podcast. She's a technology evangelist and industry thought leader with extensive experience in cloud SaaS transformations and a passion for improving manufacturing through innovative solutions. So, Kerrie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lisa. It's my pleasure.
So share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to doing what you do.
Sure. All right. So you mentioned I serve as the Group Vice President of Product Management at Epicor, and I'm also the host of the Manufacturing the Future podcast. So it's always wonderful to speak with a fellow podcast host. Glad we get to have this conversation. I've been in the software technology space and specifically within manufacturing technology for nearly 20 years. My education is actually in writing, business, and marketing. But actually, after graduating college, I started my career in the product lifecycle management category of business applications. And when I think back on it and reflect, I have to admit, I think this was a great place to start. Software can be fairly intangible. It exists out there. And with my personality, what really drives me is building something. And honestly, PLM software by its very nature is really just that. It traces an idea through to design, pulling together your bill of materials through production to really create, sell, and end of life or recycle products. While I was in the PLM space, my job was to interview company leaders that were using that software and to write case studies. An otherwise somewhat intangible thing really came to life for me through their stories. And I got to hear and speak with business leaders who built their entire careers on the process of invention or innovation. And I really thought that was very compelling. I enjoyed telling those stories. I eventually expanded from PLM, product lifecycle management, into supply chain management, and eventually to the full breadth of ERP solutions, enterprise resource planning, and the variety of business applications that comes with. So cloud technologies. And now we're evolving with generative AI solutions that are really needed for the future of manufacturing. And in the work that I do at Epicor, other related industries like distribution, retail, building supply, and the automotive aftermarket. Now that I lead product management at Epicor, I have to say it's a highly rewarding discipline, really for many reasons, but similar to what I had done at the outset of my career, product managers are always working with customers, other users, business leaders in the industry. We're interviewing them on a regular basis. We're brainstorming with them. We really want to understand what are the problems that they're trying to solve, why, what would solving them mean for their business, what value would it create, how can we partner with them to solve those challenges and achieve their goals. And I have to say, if you're a curious person, if you're creative, you have an affinity for data, and tenacious, product manager is a great career. At my outset, I didn't know about product management. I grew into it, but we're truly builders, creators, designers, and we're really collaborators. We take great pride in that value that we deliver when we're working with customers. As far as working with customers at Epicor, I'll give you a bit of an example of, again, that day-to-day. We're working, for example, with a global metal fabricator. They've been transforming their company to become a more sustainable organization. They want to make it known as part of their brand. So they need to track carbon emissions across this their production cycle. They want to issue reports to regulators. They need to print labels for their customers so that they know that they're a forward-looking business and to take pride in doing business with a company like them. So we're helping this organization automate their tracking, reporting, operations, reducing carbon emissions throughout the manufacturing process. Another quick example is we're working with a premium automotive organization to gather Internet of Things or IoT data from sensors on their manufacturing floor, applying AI to predict changes to the process, to maintenance that may be required, recommended actions. I'm telling you this because it's exciting. We're making a difference and an impact every day. So that's what it's like on a regular basis.
That's awesome. Well, I know one of the reasons we were going to have you on the show is you have a new report called the Voice of the Manufacturing Worker Report. So I'd love for you to just share a brief overview of some of the key findings from this year's report.
Yeah, you bet. At Epicor, as part of our mission, we, of course, are working with these organizations to understand what are their challenges, what are their plans for the future, and how can we best serve as their technology partner of the future. So, of course, that means understanding at a very deep level, not just the decision makers, the supervisors, or the business leaders, but even among the frontline workers. What are their challenges? How is that evolving over time? And I think the results were really interesting. We interviewed 600 workers really across primarily the United States. And I thought the results were interesting because they really highlighted contrasting realities or some dualities, I would say, that are impacting manufacturing. And it's probably not too surprising. I'm sure as your listeners have been listening to your podcast for so long, like this industry is really undergoing a transformation. It's contending with labor shortages, supply chain disruptions. There's high fluctuating costs of raw materials and energy, new technologies, of course. And I think as we go through the results, you'll hear that transformation is playing out in some of these results, because some of them are a bit opposing. In the highlights, we'll go through three primary ones: commitment to the role, morale, and technology. So when it comes to commitment, it's interesting because we saw a significant drop in the amount of respondents that said they plan to leave their job in the next year. So that's good. It's down from 56% in 2023 to 43% in 2024. But at the same time, we saw that many workers said that they're still seeking inspiration elsewhere. In fact, more than half said that they'd take a slight pay cut to work in a more sustainable factory or a more technology-driven factory. So that's the aspect of commitment. When it comes to morale, this was a bit unfortunate. We saw a bit of a drop. Only 45% said morale at their company is high, and that's down from 52% last year. At the same time, though, they take deep pride in what they do. The top two things that they said they enjoy most about their work are being a part of building or creating something with their hands, which I could totally relate to. I'm sure we all could. And then the second one was contributing to the mission of the company. So those were the interesting opposing results within morale. And then as far as technology, the investments were somewhat stagnating. So companies that said that they're investing in new technology only increased very slightly from 45% to 49%. But at the same time, 83% who had the opportunity to use new technologies said that they worked more efficiently because of it. And maybe that made them feel more comfortable with on-the-job exposure, because we actually saw fewer respondents saying that they thought automation would replace their jobs. That was actually down from 64% to 52%.
Oh, that's so interesting. I think about one of probably the greatest benefits of the pandemic was the access to technology, that it just made it so incredibly simple to use in most cases and understand, and just the changes we've seen in the last 4 years with generative AI and everything coming in that I know that I personally use on a daily basis now. One of the things that the report mentioned was a decline in the commitment to upskilling. So why do you think that's going on, and how can manufacturing leaders address that issue?
Yeah, that was definitely concerning. A bit of the context, the number that are investing in upskilling is still okay, but any decline in training or upskilling is, of course, a concern. In 2024, 70% of companies said that they're actively pursuing training initiatives and making this a priority. And in 2023, that was 80%. So we saw a 10-point slip from last year. So that's pretty significant. And I think they're counting on others to do the training for them. It's an investment, right? Many organizations are counting on technical centers, trade schools, universities, but by not upskilling your workers, that could have pretty serious implications, right? You risk losing the talent most interested in growing and developing. They could be going to competitors. course, you also risk going obsolete. Employees are seeking out these learning opportunities. They might be learning from that competition. In fact, I saw an interesting report. It was actually from Deloitte saying that one of the top reasons for the skills shortage in one of their surveys was that new job entrants have different expectations for jobs and careers. So they quit and go to something else. So there's some pretty serious implications by not upskilling.
Wow. I know in a lot of my programs, I always talk about the fact that some people are afraid that if they invest all that money in training, their employees are going to leave anyway. And it's what if you don't invest and they stay?
Right.
And it catches them because it's such exactly what you said, that employees want to be better tomorrow than they are today. They want to know that their employer cares enough about them to invest in them. And their chances are good that they're going to stay with that because you see the significant drop and the companies aren't investing. So if you have a company that does, that seems like it would be a huge competitive advantage.
Agreed. And there are ways to do it, right? Like on the job training, online courses. In fact, when we asked specifically about this, what is your interest level to the frontline workers as to would you take advantage of this if you had the opportunity to do? And 66% that they would trade their current job for one that required longer hours but offered more upskilling opportunities. I thought that was pretty shocking. And 72% said that they anticipate new ways of automation and they want to have those skills in order to supervise or to lead that automation because they don't want to be replaced by it, right? They want to roll in this future. To your point, if an organization doesn't make it a priority, it is concerning. And there are absolutely strategies and ways to make it a priority.
And the other thing that you mentioned, which is so fascinating, is the frontline workers, because a lot of times we think of investing in our people and we're looking at our high potentials or we're looking at our managers and leadership training, but you have no idea who's on that front line that has the skills, the knowledge, but has never been given the invitation for an opportunity to do something different and to roll with it. And that person's who's going to stay and be loyal. And so many good things can come from just making those invitations and seeing who takes you up on it. Because there's going to be plenty of people that are going to be like, way too busy. My plate is full. I can't put in any extra hours or learn new stuff. But the people who do that, those are the people you keep your eyes on.
Absolutely. Huge opportunity.
So with workplace morale, and that Gallup numbers have not really changed a whole bunch since they started keeping them. But when you're seeing those numbers with workplace morale on the decline, what are some strategies that you're seeing that companies implement that are working at boosting morale and overall satisfaction?
Yeah, this is really important, right? Because all of these reasons will contribute to a greater morale in the workplace, therefore helping you keep the staff that you do have, help you to go into the future and build that competitive advantage. When it comes to the most critical factors that we saw influence morale was fair compensation, flexibility in their schedule, and management who listens to staff. And I thought that was really fascinating. Compensation, of course, like very straightforward.
Right.
Flexibility, though, that was very high. And flexibility means the ability to set your own schedule, to make changes to your schedule, to have that autonomy in your role in order to get the job done that you need to get done, but also to have more of a work-life balance. I thought that was really fascinating. That is difficult, though, from a business leader perspective to create the kind of environment that allows for flexibility. And then that other piece was management who listens to staff. And that could be a great place to start to create a better workplace, right? Because if you're able to talk to your staff, to listen to them, to take action based on what they say, you might start to learn ways to create flexibility. You might learn ways to increase their compensation, right? In different ways. It could be different benefits. It could be bonuses. But once you start listening, I think that's where you're going to really learn how to create that kind of workplace environment that increases morale.
Absolutely. And with flexibility in a pre-pandemic economy, we never thought that flexibility and manufacturing would be in the same sentence. And I know I encourage my clients and audiences to ask themselves questions that they never thought that they had to ask before. For me, in 2020, I never asked the question, gee, I wonder what would happen if a worldwide pandemic came and shut down my business for 2 years. We have to ask the questions, how can we incorporate flexibility into our manufacturing? And it's being done. It's finding those best practices. I had one of my clients that said, basically, Lisa, we have an almost anything goes policy. As long as you communicate with us, we are going to work with you to help you get around your babysitting issues and your transportation issues or whatever you need so that you can make it here. So it's just fascinating how people are still kicking and screaming about flexibility, and yet it's so high on the list of what employees want.
Absolutely. And when it comes to how can you create that kind of flexibility, I think now that technology piece is really closely tied to it. And you mentioned that too when we're thinking about what we had all learned during the pandemic, right? Because there are technology tools that can help improve communication, like collaboration technology. That could be a great way to start to listen to your staff, especially if you have a large staff. A collaboration tool could really assist from a technology perspective. And then once you become more efficient through automation, through technology, you might be able to allow for more flexibility within your worker schedule.
And in the report, you have found with investments in technology that there was actually a slight increase in technology investments, but the enthusiasm for new technology is waning. So how can leaders reignite interest and effectively integrate new technologies like big data, 3D printing, robotics, augmented reality, all of these cool new technologies that are out there?
Yeah, I think the technology really needs to be closely tied to pragmatic value, like a really clear outcome that will be as a result of that investment. Because if you're just investing in big data, AI, for the heck of it, that's not going to be compelling and it might not be helpful. So you really have to just go back to the basics, I would recommend. Back to the fundamentals of making investments, link it to a strong business case, align it to your company goals, determine the metrics for success, model your expected ROI and the total cost of ownership, get buy-in from your stakeholders. It's all about, at this point, that pragmatic value and really empowering workers on a day-to-day basis, helping them to do what they love most. As we learned from the report, that's building something, making an impact. It's not so much the mundane busy work of manual data entry or re-entry. And also consider the types of technology that makes it a safer workplace, like robotics, that helps, as we mentioned, with communication, like the collaboration tools. So I think once you take a technology and really link it to a clear outcome, that's going to help when it comes to driving the enthusiasm for the technology.
Well, and you look at the newer generations coming into the workplace who are basically digital natives with the younger millennials, Gen Z, and they see the world differently. And so just being able to ask your employees, what is some of the cool tech that you're seeing? What would make your life easier? Because in a lot of times, if it's an app or something that they can easily implement, I had one of my clients, basically, they found that a guy was really great with programming. And that was like his passion, his side hustle, what he did. He ended up like automating part of the plant because they just let him go and do something that he was naturally good at, natural automatic buy-in. So sometimes, especially when you have more tenured workers that still may be afraid of that technology, or the owners and leaders of the manufacturing companies, to really be open to what your employees are seeing and seeing how you can start to implement some of that, because the buy-in is going to be so much easier that way.
Lisa, you're reminding me of some advice that I had heard it was an AI conference. And I thought this was such good advice. And it was really similar to what you had just shared there. Find the person in your organization that is the most excited about new technology. It might not be the person who has the greatest technology education, that has all of the experience, but somebody who's innately curious, and set up a meeting with that person every 2 weeks to just chat. It could be 30 minutes, it could be 15 minutes, What have you learned? What do you think that we could do differently? Is there a technology that you would recommend we look into a little bit? Just, it could be as simple as that to get started. But yeah, how rewarding is that for that person who had that just innate interest and was then able to make such a big impact?
And going back to what you said, as far as the third thing, managers who listen, when that younger or newer employee to the organization has leadership listening to them and implementing some of their ideas and having those regular conversations, there's very little chance of them going somewhere else because they've probably never had that kind of connection and felt valued and appreciated in the organization by just their managers listening and acting on some of the suggestions that they have.
Right on. I think so much of this, we talk about new technologies and all of these investments, but really it still comes down to people and how you engage them and reward them and excite them. It always comes to the team that you have and making sure that they feel rewarded and listened to and excited to come to work every day.
Yep. Well, you had also mentioned sustainability, and I tell you, that comes up on almost all of my podcast interviews because employees today want to be aligned with companies that are sustainable and that they share their values. So what are you seeing the steps that manufacturer leaders can take to prioritize sustainability really in a meaningful way that connects with their employees?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and same, we are seeing sustainability increase in attention, investment, prioritization, and it is something that people care about, customers care about, communities care about. I could share with you a little bit about how Epicor is approaching this because I was really excited to recently announce a partnership with an organization that is going to help feed the data into the Epicor applications. Because a lot of what organizations need to do from a sustainability standpoint is to understand their carbon impact. And to understand your carbon impact, you need the data to illustrate how much carbon is within this material, how much carbon would be spent doing this shipment. And all of that really comes down to the data, and you have to report on it. And if you don't have access to that information, you're left doing a lot of manual work and trying to reach out to your suppliers and manually calculate it and figure it out. And that could be really challenging. So I think taking a look at what kind of data you have in your system, what kind of regulation you might be facing in the areas that you're doing business. Last count I saw, 149 countries had claimed net zero targets by 2030. And that means that in the next 5 years, regulations are going into effect that are going to require organizations doing business in just about every location around the world to do this reporting. And so I think a first step is really to understand what is the state of your data, the regulations that you need to comply with, and how ready are you? And once you get to that point, I think then you can look for a partner to assist in that kind of journey. And once you do, to be able to tell that story of your organization being focused on sustainability, over 1,000 companies around the world have now pledged their own net zero target. So they are able to leverage this as part of their brand equity and helping drive demand for their organization because of this commitment. Companies and customers who care about this want to do business with organizations like that. And as we saw within the report, the majority said that it was like 60% said that they would they would take a slight pay cut to go to work for a more sustainable factory. So not only would you be increasing, of course, your revenue share and gaining customers, but you'd also be gaining qualified talent, people who want to make an impact and be a part of your organizations. I think there are a couple different ways. Certainly starts with understanding what is your desired outcome and how can you find the right partner to help you get there.
Exactly. And sustainability is going to keep them, but we still have a lot of turnover concerns. You found that the report had 43% of workers considering leaving their jobs within a year. Are there additional strategies that companies can employ to improve retention and reduce that possible turnover?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes to what we were sharing previously around first talk to your staff, understand their challenges, understand their needs, and not just have that one conversation, but create the mechanism going forward to continue those conversations and be ready to take action. And not only take action, but then be able to report back to your employees that you have been listening and that you've taken action. One of the ways in which we've seen organizations respond and take that kind of action is in the investment of the kind of technology needs that their frontline workers would require. Something like to increase workplace safety with robotics to automate potentially dangerous jobs. That is a great example of some kind of investment that you could make from a technology perspective to really have a very, clear impact on your workforce and to show that you care. Another aspect is, of course, the communication tools that you could invest in. But again, talk with your team, understand their challenges, have ongoing conversations, and show that you're taking action.
And having those conversations is so important to buy in, because a lot of times you go to a conference or you go to a trade show and somebody's showing you some slick new technology and it's the coolest thing on the planet, and you invest in that without talking to anybody. Not gonna work. So it is just continuing that conversation, listening to people, seeing what lights them up. All of those, again, it comes down to how are we listening to our employees, acting, letting them know that we value their input, that we appreciate the effort that they're doing, and that we're investing in them as well. I know that we could talk about this obviously all afternoon, but I do want to talk about future trends. Based on the report's findings, what future trends are you foreseeing in the manufacturing industry? And how can companies prepare to meet these challenges and opportunities that are coming?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is really fascinating to see where all of this is headed. I would say we're certainly seeing an increase in automation. And alongside the increase in automation, we're seeing an increase in AI. AI has been a part of manufacturing technology for decades, especially when you look at technologies such as MRP, material requirements planning, that are learning from past behaviors to make machine learning type of predictions into the future. But when it comes to generative AI, it's really exciting to see where that is taking us. As we're considering the talent shortages, the requirement to empower workers, to help them get back to what they love to do, to build things, to create things, to make an impact, we need to empower workers. And I think we're going to see a shift in technology that's really geared towards the frontline workers, the workers on the shop floor. We've seen so many technologies for business leaders, for decision makers and the executives, like business intelligence, forecasting technology, these kinds of things. Of course, that is going to continue to remain very important. But I think we're going to see an increase in the types of technologies that empower the frontline workers. And generative AI is excellent for that, because when you take an approach of incorporating generative AI into your existing manufacturing technology, such as MRP, such as the enterprise resource planning, such as your order entry screens, your production screens, those are screens that your workers are already using every day. And by modifying the way in which they interact with these screens in a way that is much more natural language, a way that is a lot faster for them to get the information that they need to get back to doing the job that they're doing, I think that is going to just skyrocket in growth, because it's going to be so easy to adopt. It's going to be within the screens that they're already using and have very clear value. That's going to help, again, make sure that when you are thinking about your own investments, that, just as I said, you're going back to the fundamentals, make sure where your bottlenecks are, where your challenges are within your production lines, within your operations across your business, and really focus in on those areas and have a clear desired output for what you would be investing in. But as far as the way we're going to see all of this grow and change, I do think there's going to be an emphasis on the workers. And then, of course, very closely related is not only would they be interacting with the machine, but then interacting with each other. So being able to have very quick conversations with each other about parts within the system, about production lines, about what's been happening shift to shift, that is going to increase as well. And then, of course, sustainability, the types of data feeds to augment the information that's already within the technology that you're using, to make sure you have now visibility into not just the part, the materials, the costs, where it's been sold, the orders that are associated with it, but you'll also see the carbon impact and then be able to report on that information. So I think these are the primary areas, and you're not going to get there without upskilling. So it's going to be absolutely critical to make sure that you're doing the training, that you're helping your teams gain access to this information, training them, upskilling them. It could be on the job. It could be, of course, online courses, taking time off to go do courses that are really specific. But I think we'll see an increase in upskilling as well to be prepared for what lies ahead.
We covered a lot in this conversation today. So if people wanted to continue the conversation with you or find your Manufacturing the Future podcast, what's the best way for people to connect with and stay in touch with you?
Thank you, Lisa. I would recommend that folks come over to epicor.com. That's where you could find all the information about Epicor that I had shared. That's where you can find the report. Also, please come find me on LinkedIn. I'm at Kerrie Jordan, KerrieJordan on LinkedIn. And it would be great to connect with anyone who wants to reach out.
Kerrie, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your being here.
Thank you.
I'm Lisa Ryan, and this is the Manufacturers Network podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturers Network podcast. Do me a favor and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can grow this network and connect more fantastic folks just like you. You can either send your buddies to the website at manufacturers-network.com or share the Manufacturers Network podcast on your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever you and your industry friends hang out. The bigger and faster we grow the network, the stronger and deeper the community we'll all have. Thanks again, and I appreciate you.